I thought marriage meant gaining a family, but what I got was a gilded cage. My in-laws smiled at me during dinner, then whispered venom behind closed doors. The day they told me I couldn't attend my own sister's wedding, I knew I was nothing more than a pawn in their game. I didn't fight, I vanished. While they thought I was broken, I was building. While they mocked my silence, I was sharpening my weapons. And when I returned, I wasn't the woman they dismissed. I was the storm they never saw coming, and storms never ask for permission. When I first married Daniel, I believed I had finally stepped into a sanctuary. He was attentive, charming, the kind of man who knew how to make a woman feel safe. His family welcomed me with warm embraces and polished smiles. They praised my cooking at Sunday dinners, complimented my clothes, even called me our Rachel. For a time, I let myself believe I belonged. The house we lived in felt like a mansion of possibilities, every room promising a future of shared laughter. But illusions are fragile, and mine began to crack in silence. It started with whispers, the sort you're not supposed to hear. Late one night, while scrolling through the security footage on our home system, I caught a moment that burned into me. My mother-in-law, Margaret, stood in the kitchen with Daniel's sister, sipping wine. Her tone was sweet poison. She's useless, just a pretty ornament. Daniel deserves better. They both laughed, a cruel, cutting laugh that told me I was nothing more than a guest, tolerated until further notice. My hand trembled on the remote, but I didn't react. I closed the laptop, went to bed, and lay beside my husband as if nothing had happened. That night, I learned the power of silence. Pretending not to know gave me room to breathe, to observe. Still, the sting of betrayal lingered in my chest, sharp as glass. Days later, Margaret's smile turned sharper. She began to slip in little reminders that I was, after all, only a wife, not a daughter. "In this house," she said one morning, her hand resting on my shoulder like a weight, "family comes first. You'll learn." I smiled back, lips curved, heart cracking. The test came soon after. My sister Emily's wedding was approaching, and I was excited, giddy even at the thought of standing by her side. But when I mentioned it at dinner, Margaret's fork clinked against her plate. "You won't be going," she said casually, as if announcing the weather. My sister-in-law chimed in, "Your place is here with us. Family unity matters more than old ties." Daniel stayed silent, staring at his glass, and that silence was louder than any command. I laughed nervously, thinking it a joke, but their faces were steel. My chest tightened. "She's my sister," I whispered. But Margaret cut me off with a smile so cold it burned. "You're part of this family now. Don't forget where your loyalty lies." I excused myself, locked the bathroom door, and sat on the floor until my legs went numb. The injustice was suffocating. They weren't just keeping me from a wedding, they were erasing me, piece by piece, until nothing remained but their version of Rachel. That night I cried into my pillow, silent, careful not to wake Daniel. And when I finally slept, it was with the heavy knowledge that I was alone in a house full of people, but silence again was my shield. I played the part, smiled at the right moments, nodded at the right words. Beneath it, though, I began to notice the patterns, the hushed conversations that stopped when I entered, the quick glances between Margaret and Daniel whenever bills were mentioned. One evening, while Daniel showered, I walked past his study. The door was slightly ajar, papers spread across the desk. Something pulled me closer. My eyes scanned the documents, and my stomach dropped. A loan agreement, signed in my name. Numbers I didn't recognize, figures I never authorized. My handwriting, but not my hand. My pulse pounded as realization set in. Margaret's words, their insistence that I stay away from Emily's wedding, it was all connected. I reached for the papers, but the sound of the water shutting off froze me in place. Heart racing, I slid them back, stepping out of the room as though I had never been there. My face in the hallway mirror looked foreign, a stranger staring back with hollow eyes. That night, as Daniel slipped into bed beside me, I kept my breathing steady, my eyes closed. Inside, though, the truth screamed louder than any nightmare. This wasn't about loyalty or unity. This was about control, about secrets, about a family willing to bury me to protect themselves. And though they didn't know it yet, I had seen enough to understand the rules of their game. The morning after I discovered the forged loan papers, I made a choice. I would no longer confront them directly. Instead, I would play the role they expected. Quiet, compliant, the perfect daughter-in-law who bent beneath the weight of their rules. At breakfast, I smiled when Margaret corrected the way I poured the coffee. I nodded when my sister-in-law mocked my simple taste in clothes. I even laughed softly when Daniel ignored me mid-conversation. They believed my silence meant surrender, but in truth, it was camouflage. By day, I was their obedient Rachel. By night, I became someone else. After Daniel fell asleep, I would slip quietly into the closet, close the door, and pull out my laptop from behind a stack of winter coats. There, in the dim glow of the screen, I enrolled in courses on fintech, blockchain, and digital assets. My headphones pressed tight against my ears as I studied the mechanics of decentralized systems, taking notes with a precision that felt like survival. Every keystroke was a rebellion, every lecture a brick in the fortress I was building around myself. The irony wasn't lost on me. Margaret and Daniel thought they had stripped me of independence, yet their control gave me the discipline to sharpen my hidden edge. I mirrored back the weakness they wanted to see, but inside I was cultivating strength they couldn't imagine. Weeks passed, and I grew stronger in my secret world. I built small models of digital wallets, tested transaction chains, and learned how to mask identities online. It wasn't just knowledge, it was power. In those late hours, I stopped feeling like a victim and started feeling like a strategist. And though no one could see it yet, I knew the tide was shifting. Then came the revelation. One evening, Daniel forgot his phone on the nightstand when he left for a late meeting. Curiosity mixed with dread pulled me toward it. I shouldn't have looked, but something inside urged me on. A string of messages blinked on the screen, conversations between him and Margaret. At first they seemed ordinary, reminders, errands. But then I saw an attachment, a video file labeled simply, "Signature." My heart pounded as I copied it onto a flash drive. Later, alone in the closet, I opened the file. My blood ran cold, the screen flickered, and there it was, me. My face, my voice, my signature, all stitched together in a flawless, deep fake. The recording showed Rachel signing the loan agreement, speaking words I had never uttered. It was seamless, terrifyingly convincing. For a long time, I sat frozen, unable to breathe. The violation was beyond words. They hadn't just stolen my name, they had manufactured my compliance. They had turned me into a puppet, a convenient scapegoat for their schemes. The betrayal deepened into something darker. This wasn't just cruelty, it was calculated erasure. But fear eventually gave way to clarity. I downloaded the video, encrypted it, and stored copies in hidden drives. This wasn't just evidence, it was ammunition. I wasn't ready to expose them yet, but I knew one day the right moment would come. And when it did, this file would be my blade. Fueled by fury and determination, I doubled down on my secret life. My learning transformed into building. I drafted the first outlines of a startup that combined security, financial literacy, and blockchain technology. It wasn't just a business, it was a statement, a way to reclaim what they had stolen. Each night I coded interfaces, sketched out strategies, and imagined a future where my name would no longer be their tool, but my shield. To keep up appearances, I let them think I was fading. At dinner, I lowered my eyes and answered only when spoken to. When Margaret boasted about her flawless reputation, I forced a smile, though my fingers itched to reveal the truth. When Daniel lectured me about staying in my lane, I murmured agreement, while deep inside I was carving my own lane wide enough to drown them in. In the mirror, I practiced stillness, but in the glow of my laptop, I saw my reflection change. I no longer looked like the naive bride desperate for approval. I saw focus, control, a woman reborn in secrecy. My silence was no longer submission, it was strategy. The night I secured my first digital wallet under my own private key, I felt something shift. For the first time since marrying Daniel, I had something untouchable, something they couldn't take or forge. It was mine, and it was proof that I wasn't powerless. As I shut down my laptop, I looked at the flash drive containing the deepfake video. My pulse steadied, and I whispered to myself, "Not yet, but soon." Because weapons, once revealed, cannot be hidden again, and mine were sharper than they would ever expect. The day I packed my bag, I left no note, no explanation, just silence. To Margaret and Daniel, it must have looked like surrender, the weak wife fleeing under the weight of shame. They would whisper that I couldn't handle the pressure, that I had run away from responsibility. Let them think so. Their belief in my weakness was my cover, my cloak of invisibility. In truth, I wasn't running. I was repositioning. I rented a small apartment across town, nothing fancy, just enough to disappear into the noise of the city. From that space, I poured every waking hour into the blueprint of my fintech startup. I had chosen a name that carried no trace of me, no ties to my past. Helios Ledger, clean, anonymous, and powerful. To the outside world, I became a ghost, but online I birthed a new persona. Using an alias, I opened accounts on Twitter, LinkedIn, and niche forums where finance and blockchain enthusiasts gathered. My posts began simply: threads explaining basic principles of decentralized finance, videos breaking down security risks, guides for people who had been scammed. My words carried no name, but they carried weight. Slowly, the anonymous figure known only as Aurora began to gain traction. Every like, every comment was a spark, fueling the fire of something larger than I had ever imagined. The more I shared, the more people trusted me. They didn't know I was the wife erased by her in-laws, the scapegoat of forged contracts. They only knew that Aurora spoke with clarity and conviction. Weeks turned into months, and Aurora was no longer a whisper, but a rising voice in the world of digital finance. One evening, while scrolling through notifications, I paused at a message that stood out from the noise. The sender had no name, just a series of encrypted characters. The message was short: "Your insights could change the game. Let's meet, off record." My chest tightened. An investor? A trap? My instincts screamed caution, but my ambition leaned forward. I reread the message again and again until finally I replied with a single word: "Where?" That night I hardly slept. My mind spun between fear and possibility, caught in the razor's edge of risk and reward. It wasn't just about the money, it was about validation. Someone out there had seen beyond the alias, recognized the potential I had built in silence. While I wrestled with this decision, my absence was already rewriting the narrative back at Daniel's house. Margaret wasted no time spinning her version of events. She couldn't handle the debt, she told neighbors. She abandoned her husband. My sister-in-law spread the whispers further, crafting me into a cautionary tale. A woman too fragile for the world. I let them speak. Every rumor was a rope they tied around their own throats. Because while they painted me as weak, Helios Ledger was already climbing. Then it happened. A small tech blog published an article about a mysterious new startup gaining traction in the blockchain space. Anonymous female CEO disrupts financial security industry. The piece was speculative, vague, but it was enough to spark curiosity. Helios Ledger's reach grew overnight. Investors whispered, journalists circled. My heart raced as I read the words, me, a ghost in their narrative, now alive in another. The contrast was almost poetic. While Margaret spun lies about me being a runaway, the digital world hailed Aurora as a pioneer. I had become two people at once, the failure in their story and the future in my own. But victories never come without shadows. Just days after the article spread, I received another message, this time from a journalist with a name I recognized. She wrote, "We're preparing a feature on Helios Ledger. We'd like to interview the woman behind the curtain. Who is Aurora?" My hands trembled as I closed the laptop. This was the cliff's edge I had been walking toward. Exposure could mean everything: credibility, funding, freedom. But it could also mean risk, vulnerability, the unraveling of everything I had built in secret. I stood at the window of my apartment, staring down at the city lights flickering like restless stars. For the first time, I felt the gravity of the path I had chosen. If I stepped forward, there would be no turning back. The world was watching, and someone was determined to unmask me. The morning of Emily's wedding dawned crisp and bright, the kind of day that begged for new beginnings. For me, it would be a rebirth. I stepped out of the car in a dress that shimmered like molten silver, tailored to perfection, my hair swept into a style that spoke of power, not submission. Gone was the timid wife they remembered. In her place stood a woman who had carved herself out of shadows. Heads turned as I walked toward the venue, whispers following like ripples in water. My mother's eyes widened, then filled with tears as she rushed to embrace me. Emily gasped when she saw me, her hands covering her mouth, mascara already smudging. For a brief moment, I let myself bask in their warmth. This was why I had fought in silence, to stand beside them not as a prisoner, but as myself. The murmurs began almost immediately among the other guests. She came back? I thought she ran off. My in-laws, clustered near the entrance, froze. Margaret's face tightened, her practiced smile slipping. Daniel looked as though he'd seen a ghost. I held their eyes and smiled. Not the small, nervous smile they were used to, but one born of knowing I held the upper hand. During the reception, as the music softened and guests gathered for speeches, I rose from my seat. The room hushed, curious. My voice carried steady, clear. Some of you may have heard stories about me, that I abandoned my marriage, that I was weak. But tonight, I want to tell you who I really am. I reached into my clutch, pulling out a small remote. Behind me, a screen flickered to life. Slides appeared. Images of blockchain systems, news articles, screenshots from online communities. For months, you've known me as Rachel, but many of you have unknowingly read the words of Aurora, the founder of Helios Ledger. Yes, I paused as gasps filled the room. The startup you've seen in headlines, valued at over $100 million, is mine. The shift was palpable. In an instant, I was no longer the discarded wife. I was the storm that had risen from silence. Emily's face glowed with pride. My mother clutched her chest, overwhelmed. Strangers applauded, some rising to their feet. Even those who had whispered against me now stared in awe. But I wasn't finished. My gaze found Margaret. Success isn't the only truth I've brought with me tonight. With another click, the screen changed. Grainy footage filled the room. The video I had discovered months ago. Margaret in the kitchen with her daughter, laughing. "She's useless," Margaret's voice echoed through the hall. "Just a pretty ornament. Daniel deserves better." Gasps, murmurs, a few stifled laughs of disbelief. Margaret's composure cracked, her face flushing crimson. I let the silence stretch before continuing. That was the beginning. But it didn't end there. The next clip played, the deep fake video of me signing loan papers, my fabricated voice agreeing to debts I never touched. The crowd leaned in, horrified. "This," I said, my tone sharp, "was created to erase me, to bury me in debt while they thrived." The room erupted in outrage. Guests whispered fiercely. Others stared daggers at Margaret. My sister-in-law covered her mouth in shock, but Margaret sat rigid, eyes darting like a trapped animal. Then the final slide appeared, a series of encrypted messages pulled directly from Daniel's phone. His voice notes played out loud, instructing Margaret on how to use the forged documents, how to hide the trail. "Don't worry," he said in one recording. "She'll never fight back. She doesn't have it in her." The betrayal struck the room like lightning. Faces turned toward Daniel, disbelief painted across them. My husband, my supposed ally, frozen in the spotlight of his own treachery. His lips parted, but no words came. Margaret looked at him, betrayed by his recklessness, yet still clinging to him like a drowning woman. I set down the remote and folded my hands calmly. I fought back, just not in the way you expected. The silence that followed was heavy, electric. I had detonated the truth, and there was no undoing it. Daniel finally found his voice, strained and desperate. "Rachel, you don't understand." But I cut him off with a single look. "No, Daniel, for once you don't understand me." The crowd stirred, their murmurs louder, questions flying like sparks. My mother's eyes were wet with pride. Emily reached for my hand, squeezing it tight. Margaret sat hollow, her empire of lies crumbling in front of her. And Daniel, the man I had once trusted above all, stood revealed as a conspirator in his own wife's destruction. The room didn't belong to them anymore. It belonged to me. The days after Emily's wedding felt like living inside a storm of flashbulbs. What I had revealed spread like wildfire. News anchors dissected my every word, hashtags multiplied across Twitter, and videos of my return played on loop. Silent Bride trended worldwide. Clips of me walking into the reception in silver, clips of Margaret's face twisting in horror, clips of Daniel's voice stammering from the leaked recordings. Suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of me. Investors lined up outside my office. Reporters begged for interviews. Strangers flooded my inbox with admiration, some calling me an icon of resilience. The same women who once whispered about my absence now praised me in public. Their tone changed overnight. And the very people who had tried to bury me, Margaret, her daughter, and even Daniel, were scrambling to rewrite the narrative. Margaret arrived uninvited to my apartment 2 days later, her pearls trembling against her neck as she begged for forgiveness. "It was all a misunderstanding," she said, her voice shaking. "I never meant to hurt you. We're family, Rachel. We should stand together." Her crocodile tears fell onto my doorstep, but I felt no urge to comfort her. The same woman who had once locked me out of my own sister's happiness now wanted my protection. My phone vibrated constantly. Brands wanted me to endorse them. Venture capitalists offered obscene sums to expand Helios Ledger. Young women wrote messages thanking me for giving them courage to fight back against oppressive families. It was intoxicating, like standing in a spotlight that finally revealed me for who I truly was. But with visibility came scrutiny. Journalists dug into every corner of my life, eager to find cracks. Tabloids ran photos of me walking to my office, speculating about my marriage, my motives, even my past. Some headlines called me a hero. Others painted me as a cold schemer who had orchestrated a public humiliation to climb higher. And in the shadows of those articles, Daniel's voice began to appear. He surfaced first in a sympathetic interview, his eyes red as he spoke about his love for his wife and his regret for letting his mother's insecurities create distance. "I was trapped," he said to the cameras. "I was only trying to protect her." People wanted to believe him. Some even did. After all, wasn't that the story society preferred? The poor wife confused and misguided, the noble husband trying to shield her. I wanted to scream, but I kept my composure. My silence had always been my weapon. Yet inside, a new kind of storm brewed, darker, more dangerous. Because as much as Margaret had hurt me, the truth I uncovered in those encrypted messages was far more brutal. Daniel hadn't just known about the forgery. He had orchestrated it. Piece by piece, I pieced the puzzle together. The loan in my name was his idea, not hers. Margaret had been his pawn, not his master. The man I once trusted with my heart had used me as a financial scapegoat, ensuring his family's fortune stayed clean while my reputation became the shield. He had built the lie, and then stood silently at that dinner table as his mother slashed me with words. He hadn't failed to defend me. He had chosen not to. When the realization fully sank in, the betrayal felt like poison, burning through my veins. It wasn't Margaret who had destroyed my marriage. It was Daniel, smiling while he signed me away. I confronted him days later, not with screams, but with proof. The messages, the forged contracts, the deep fake video, all neatly compiled in a single folder. I placed it on the table between us. "Your voice," I said softly. "Your plan. Your mother just played her part." For the first time, his charm cracked. His eyes hardened, his jaw clenched. "Do you think anyone will believe you over me? You think your little fans online matter when it comes to the law? This family built an empire, Rachel. You married into it. That company of yours, it'll crumble once we decide to crush it." His words were ice, deliberate and sharp. But then he leaned closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "You've embarrassed us once. Do it again, and I'll drag you down with me. Unless—" He smiled, the same smile that had once made me believe in forever. "Unless you hand over Helios Ledger, make it part of the family business, then we can rebuild together." The audacity stole my breath. After everything, he still thought he could own me. He still believed my worth existed only if it served him. He didn't realize the woman sitting across from him was no longer his pawn. I stood slowly, meeting his gaze with all the fire I had buried for so long. "You want to fight me for what I built? Fine," I said. "But remember, Daniel, wars are not won by those who play safe. They're won by those who know when to burn everything down." His smirk faltered, just for a second. That was enough. The weeks that followed were darker than I ever imagined. Every channel seemed to carry Daniel's face, every headline twisting the story into something I barely recognized. He painted himself as the betrayed husband, the victim of a wife who had supposedly orchestrated a cruel spectacle to humiliate his family. Some people believed him. Others hurled accusations at me online, calling me cold, ungrateful, vindictive. I tried to ignore it, but every notification was a knife. There were nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling of my small apartment, wondering if I had traded one prison for another. I had broken free from my in-laws' grip, only to be shackled by the weight of public opinion. Helios Ledger was thriving, but the noise outside my door threatened to drown me. Investors wanted reassurance, employees wanted protection, my family wanted to know if I was safe, and inside I was breaking. But then I remembered the words Daniel had hissed at me. Wars are not won by those who play safe. He had meant it as a threat, but it became my mantra. If I was truly to be free, I couldn't keep playing their game. I had to destroy the board entirely. The opportunity came sooner than expected. I was invited to speak at a major fintech conference in San Francisco, the kind of event that drew cameras from around the world. My team begged me to reveal myself as Aurora, to step into the light. I hesitated at first. What if they smeared me before I could even finish? But then I thought of Emily's tearful eyes, of my mother's trembling hands as she hugged me, of every woman who had written to me saying my silence had given them strength. So I agreed. The night of the conference, the auditorium was packed. Journalists lined the back, cameras perched on their shoulders, investors filled the front rows, eyes gleaming with hunger. I walked onto the stage in a black suit that felt like armor, my heels striking the floor like drum beats. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady though my heart thundered. "You've all heard of Aurora. Tonight, I want to introduce you to her." I paused, took a breath, and then said the words I had been waiting months to speak. "I am Aurora. I am Rachel." The room erupted. Gasps, applause, a few skeptical murmurs. I raised a hand for silence. But that's not the whole truth. To understand why I built Helios Ledger, you need to know the story of how it was born. Behind me, the screen lit up once more. I played the recordings, Margaret's venomous whispers, the forged contract, the deep fake video of me signing away my future. Then came Daniel's voice, instructing his mother on how to use me as their scapegoat. The audience shifted, restless, scandalized. Phones shot up, live streams broadcasting every second. Within minutes, our silent bride wasn't just trending, it was exploding. Millions were watching. I looked straight into the nearest camera. I was told I wasn't family. I was told to stay silent, so I did. But silence doesn't mean weakness. Silence means strategy. And tonight, I am breaking the game. The applause was deafening. But it wasn't just applause. It was something heavier, like a collective roar. People weren't just entertained. They were invested, complicit, carried on the tide of revelation. Somewhere backstage, I knew Daniel was watching. I could almost feel his rage pressing against the curtains, his plans unraveling thread by thread. Margaret, meanwhile, was nowhere to be seen. By morning, their family name would be a headline for all the wrong reasons. The empire they had tried to protect with lies would collapse under the weight of truth. But even as victory wrapped itself around me, a quiet ache remained. I had loved Daniel once. I had wanted his family to be my own. To see him revealed as the architect of my ruin was a wound deeper than any public scandal. Power, I realized, always extracts its price. Mine was the death of my marriage, the final shattering of illusions I once clung to. Still, I knew my choice. I would not trade my freedom for their approval. I would not hand over my company, my name, or my future. I belonged to myself now. After the conference, I walked out into the cool night, the cameras flashing like fireworks around me. Reporters shouted my name. Strangers reached out their hands, but I kept walking, steady, head high. My mother and Emily waited near the car, their faces beaming with pride. For the first time in years, I felt light. As we drove away, I glanced out the window at the city skyline, its towers piercing the night like beacons. The world was still watching, whispering, judging. But for once, I didn't care. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Because I was no longer the woman they tried to erase. I was no longer a pawn in anyone's game. I was the architect now, the one who rewrote the rules. And as the lights of the city blurred into streaks of gold, I realized something simple and liberating. I wasn't the silent bride anymore. I was the storm, and storms don't ask for permission. They decide where to break.